Let's switch to the league for a little bit. The draft is a few weeks away. Let's take a deep dive into those top 5 teams there, starting with Jacksonville at number 1, and the Jags going through a huge makeover. Urban Meyer handed the keys there, setting the bar high after having success in the college ranks with Florida and Ohio State. But it all starts with finding a QB. That's where 99.999% of us see Clemson's Trevor Lawrence coming into play. And Lawrence considered that generational talent and the no doubt at number 1. When you look at the first-round QBs taken by the Jags over the past decade, all the way back to 2003 with Byron Leftwich, and then 7 years ago, Blake Bortles, safe to say that Trevor Lawrence can easily fit right in Duval County with the type of record he's put up at Clemson and hopefully the same success there in Duval County. All right, let's welcome in 1/3 of the Pick 6 podcast, Ryan Wilson tapping in. And simple question for you here, Ryan. If the Jags want to get their QB situation right, it has to be Trevor Lawrence and nobody else at 1, right?
Yes, Brandon. I feel like Drew Rosenhaus answering questions for Terrell Owens a few years ago. Next question. Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what I told our colleague Joe Musso yesterday when he asked me that. There's a better chance of Bryson DeChambeau being the Tampa Bay Buccaneers starting quarterback and taking them to the Super Bowl next year than the Jaguars not taking Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is going to be the guy. It's a slam dunk, 100% going to happen. We saw that graphic coming in with the head coach standing at that Trevor Lawrence Pro Day, Urban Meyer, and watching very closely exactly everything that Trevor Lawrence was doing. That was back in February before he had the shoulder surgery. He's back to working, throwing the football. He's going to be completely healthy by the time the season starts. You talked about all the accolades he had at Clemson. There's no reason to think that Trevor Lawrence is not going to Jacksonville. In fact, he may already be there, Brandon. He may already be holed up, studying his playbook, looking for houses to buy, because that's where he's going to end up in less than 3 weeks from now.
I don't know. It would be interesting to see Bryson, like you just said, leading the Bucs. That would be something to see. Of course, that probably won't happen. But if we're looking at their resumes between the two, Urban Meyer, of course, he's won national championships. Trevor Lawrence coming in 34-2. We know what he's done there with Clemson. But coming into year 1 here in Jacksonville, who's has more pressure? Is it Meyer or Lawrence?
Well, I think the good news is there's going to be a honeymoon period for both players, for both player and new head coach. And you see that all the time when there's a new hire and a new coach, even at this high of a level, this high-profile situation. But it feels like probably by midway through the season, maybe even a little creeping into December, that honeymoon period is going to be over, which will be quicker than what we typically see for first-year coaches and quarterbacks, just because there's so much in the way of expectations. First overall pick, Trevor Lawrence, the next coming of the next great NFL quarterback. And I've been saying it for months. If Trevor Lawrence plays 85% of what Justin Herbert did last year as a rookie, that's a win for Jacksonville. But Urban Meyer, quote-unquote, can't mess this up. He has all the history of being a great college football coach at all the stops he made, from Utah to Bowling Green to Florida and to, of course, Ohio State. But this is a different animal. We've seen coaches come from college and not have the success they were looking for. Pete Carroll initially struggled. Nick Saban didn't work out for him. At Miami, he returned to the college ranks. So they have a ton of draft picks. They have a ton of cap space. They made some moves in free agency, but not all the moves that some fans and media folks were expecting. So they had these 6 draft picks in the first 3 rounds. They have to hit on these draft picks. It starts with Trevor Lawrence. And look, here's the reality. You're playing 17 games next year, so you can't go 8-8. But if you win 8 football games next year, 7 or 8, that's a step in the right direction. Then in 2022, you have to legitimately be pushing for a playoff spot.
I want to take a look at your mock here if we're looking at maybe building the draft here for the Jags. You haven't loaded up a lot of offensive weapons there outside of Trevor Lawrence, and Najee Harris would be nice in the backfield for him. But when you look at this, even Kadarius Toney there, is it safe to say that they're putting talent around Trevor Lawrence there to make it kind of an easy transition in year 1 for not only him but Meyer as well?
That's a great point, Brandon. And here's the thing. You don't want your NFL offense to be less explosive than your college offense, which is sort of what the Jacksonville Jaguars are currently looking at before the draft based on what we saw Clemson do the last few years for Trevor Lawrence. So Sam Cosmi comes in. He can play offensive tackle from day 1. You drafted Jawan Taylor 2 years ago at right tackle. You're solidifying the offensive line. Kadarius Toney and Najee Harris at the top of round 2. Immediate playmakers. One's a running back, obviously, who can catch passes coming out of the backfield. Kadarius Toney out of Florida plays like a running back with the ball in his hands. Incredibly explosive at all 3 levels. Tommy Tremble, they need help at tight end there. He's extremely raw, Tommy Tremble, but the upside is there. He's a fantastic blocker right now, has a chance to evolve into a really good pass catcher as well. So those are 3 key players on the opposite side of the ball that come in with Trevor Lawrence and upgrade an offense that has been inept for most of the recent history. So if that's the plan to make Trevor Lawrence better, give him playmakers. And those three names right there will go a long way in helping the Jaguars compete in that division.
Ryan, I know later this week you're releasing your top 150 the closer we get to the draft there. I want to take a look at two guys that maybe were considered first rounders last year if they came out, but not this time around. Talking about Marvin Wilson and Dylan Moses here.
Yeah, the funny thing is, Brandon, I went back and looked at my first mock draft right after the 2020 NFL draft, and both Marvin Wilson and Dylan Moses were in that first-round conversation. That was the expectation. Dylan Moses suffered an ACL injury before the 2020 season, so he had just come back for the 2021 season, and he never quite regained that form. That doesn't mean he can't do that, but we haven't seen it yet, and sometimes it takes over a year to get fully recovered from these ACLs. That saw him drop down the draft boards a little bit. In fact, he's my 11th ranked linebacker, which sounds bonkers a year ago when I had him in that first round. Then there's Marvin Wilson. Again, he's the 11th ranked defensive lineman. It sounds bonkers, but he had the hand injury in 2019 that led to him leaving that season early. There were the stops and starts with the coaching staff and the issues there and the pandemic related stuff, and he just never quite regained that form that we thought might make him a first round pick. He was the #1 player coming out of Texas out of high school ahead of Walker Little, who's the offensive tackle from Stanford, and Jeffrey Kuda, the 3rd overall pick for the Lions last year. Just hasn't come together in terms of consistency. You take a day 3 flyer on Marvin Wilson at this point and hope you can regain that form, but we just haven't seen it in the last year and a half of football from him.
Ryan, I'm curious. Of course, this offseason has been different than others. Putting this 150 together, of course, we didn't have the combine. Some guys set out, some played, but didn't play up to their potential. How difficult was this to kind of put this together for you?
You know, it wasn't that bad, Brandon, and I say this all the time when people ask this question. I can watch the tape and get an idea of what's going on with the tape. The real issue, and this is more concern for scouts and GMs, is that the scouts weren't on campus during the fall to see these players during practice, to talk to people around the players that have some insight into how they are off the field as teammates, so on and so forth. So for me, it wasn't that difficult because I'm still looking at the same football games that these kids played. Now, some of the kids that opted out didn't play in 2020. That makes it a little tougher, but I'll just talk to my folks around the league, the scouts that I know, and get some insights that way. But I think this has been much more difficult for NFL teams to get a grasp of these players than it has been for the media folks like myself who just study them and try to get an idea where they may end up going come draft weekend. All
right, we're just 17 days where some of these guys will hear their name called on the draft there, set April 29th. Ryan Wilson, tapping in. Appreciate your time as always, my friend. Don't forget, you can check them out on the Pick 6 podcast with Will Brinson, John Breach. The fellas always diving in. Of course, we're talking about some of these guys that might hear their name, as well as we're diving into the top 5 there. We just did the Jags. All this week, we're going through 1 through 5 of those first 5 picks. Also, Ryan's top 150. Check in, download, and give the pod a listen.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.